Once again, welcome to the Not A Rabbi podcast, the podcast where we discover new things about Judaism every time I speak. Yes, I am your host. I am apparently getting attacked because of some horrible, horrible rumors that are going around about me now that I use a V60 pour over with pre-ground coffee. Yes, this is the case. I am proud to admit it, actually. And eventually maybe I'll change, but I'm not going to right now because I'm that lazy. Deal with it. All right. So we have a very exciting show today, I think. We've got, first off, gotta lead off with the gratitude. And I gotta thank the moderators of the Unofficial Fifth Column Podcast Discord server for allowing me to do this live recording in front of a live studio audience. And we are here. And additionally, I would like to thank Logan Eastman, who is not yet in the chat and in the as part of the live studio audience, for creating the music for the intro. If you would like to visit his Substack, you can certainly do that, and there is a link to that in the show notes, as always. Additionally, there are going to be links. There are links in the show notes for subscribing to the Not A Rabbi podcast Substack page, if you would like to do that, where you can get exciting content such as this, in addition to getting the exciting newsletter that generally goes out every Wednesday at 8:42 a.m. Ask me about why 8:42 a.m. one day, please. That's an interesting question that I wonder about. Why 8:42 exactly? Also, why so serious? Okay. Anyway, we've got a good show today, I think. Today we're going to talk about the topic of slavery in the Bible, and I'm going to actually push that out a little bit and push that bubble to include another topic as well, which I think gets there. We've got some feedback from the previous podcast, and in addition, we've got some interesting news articles as well. So, with that, let's get into the feedback. Today's feedback comes from somebody whom I've known for over 30 years at this point. She happens to live with me also, my wife. Yes, she listens to my podcast, the only family member that does, and I thank her for that. And I pay for it every day. No, just kidding. Anyhow, she makes a comment when I was talking about the svardim and mostly them coming from North Africa. She mentions here that svardim also come from Western Europe, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, where the Ashkanasim come from Eastern Europe. And as I explained to her, that she's only partially correct in this, where the svardim also had, because of the Muslim incursion, I guess you would say, into Europe, that got through Portugal and Spain mostly, and if I'm not mistaken, it might have been only Spain, but regardless, they were in Spain, so that would be correct. Italy is an interesting case as well, where, again, there was a migration that happened that was post the Spanish Inquisition, or actually the expulsion of Jews in Spain, which happened in 1492, the same day that Columbus set sail for India, and never got there because he was a man and he doesn't know how to ask for directions. So there we go with that. However, so there was this migration that happened. First, it was very interesting, actually. Not the purpose of this podcast, however, where there was the Spanish Jews migrated to a couple of places. They first migrated to the Netherlands because the Netherlands was consistently a very tolerant country with regard to other religions, and they also did migrate eventually to Spain as well, where Dona Nacia Grassi helped out with getting a lot of the conversos back out of Spain and protect them. Again, another story for another time, but my wife is correct where Italy and Spain and Portugal did have a Sephardic connection. France, not so much. France really did not. That was more of an Ashkenazic country, and so there is that correction that my wife has made, which is partially correct. Any thoughts, feedback, or comments regarding that feedback? So it seems that is a nope. Okay, so let's now go on to a couple of news articles. I'm going to post this first one. I thought it was interesting, from the Jewish Forward, and I'll post this into the chat for the live audience here. And what you'll see is that the Providence order offers $50,000 to young couples to move to Providence, young Orthodox Jewish couples to move to Providence and raise their children there and have them grow up there. They are actually looking to increase their Jewish population and the community there. And so what they're looking to do is they are actually looking to, this is I'm not even sure the article I missed. Maybe I missed in the article. However, it seems like I'm not sure how they're paying this. But, $50,000 apparently to the individual who is interviewed here would go a long way to a down payment on a 3-bedroom home on the east side of Providence where the Jewish community is located. Apparently other communities have tried this as well. Two in particular here, Dothan, Alabama, which is about 100 miles southeast of Montgomery, Alabama. And I did not even know that there was a Jewish community there. That's a much better link. Thank you very much for putting that link in. I don't know why my link isn't good, but I'll try to fix that on the next podcast. Or not the next podcast, but on the next news article. Also, Meridian, Mississippi, a Reform synagogue offered $25,000 grants to families who stayed at least 5 years. So it's an interesting idea. It's, to be honestly, if I were, part of the demographic that they were looking for, I would be more tempted to, do this very much. My wife, probably not so much. This is I'll get to your comment in a second. This is actually a point of discussion that my wife and I have had with regarding moving out of New York City in and of itself. I would like to. I'm not against it, but my wife is not a fan of moving outside of the 5 boroughs for whatever reason that may be. And if you want to ask her, you can leave a comment in the Not A Rabbi Substack on the podcast. So this way you can go ahead and ask her, and I'll be sure that she gets it. Somebody left a comment over here. The free struck out Jewish state project. That's yes and no. I would say, first off, most Jews are looking for free, so that's kind of redundant. But otherwise, the Free State Project, for those of you who are unaware, the Free State Project was something that that libertarians started, was that in the 1990s, 1980s, something around there? Maybe it was the 2000s, I don't remember, where they tried to get a huge amount of libertarians into, I believe it was Maine, if I'm not mistaken, and New Hampshire. Thank you very much. It was New Hampshire. I wasn't sure which one it was, but I guessed the wrong one. But it was in they wanted to get a bunch of people into New Hampshire so that they could really have a direct effect on local elections and then try to build out from there a libertarian base. Libertarians being libertarians, this worked to a degree, not so much. And when and a lot of people promised to move, and when they hit that threshold number that people had already moved in, a lot of and then you were supposed to move. A lot of people noped out. So that's but what happens with regard to Jewish communities is that people find or want a nice Jewish community to out of town, outside of New York, where the cost and outside of other large big cities where it's not as where it's housing is very expensive and everything, and they try to build up a community, and it works to a degree. Some places it does, some places it doesn't, and Providence is a nice little. Yes, they want to have more kosher restaurants on and a larger Eruv as well. 2 years ago, my wife and I went for vacation up in Providence, where there was a total of 0 restaurants. Now that may have improved to maybe a pizza shop or something like that. Pizza shops are usually the first foothold in terms of kosher restaurants. Second one would be a Chinese restaurant generally. You have to have somewhere to go on Christmas, I guess. I don't know what the reason is for the Chinese restaurants, but us Jews like our Chinese restaurants for some reason. And regardless, it didn't necessarily take off in some cities. Providence is one. With regard to restaurants, it's more of an interesting thing because there are well-established Jewish communities where they do not have a successful kosher restaurant aside from a pizza shop. A place, for example, would be Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a very good-sized Jewish community, but they can never get a more than a pizza shop up and running. And there have been times when there have been no kosher restaurants in Pittsburgh as well. So, it's an interesting thing. People, want to move. There are plenty of, if I'm sure nobody here is going to open up a Jewish Action magazine from the Orthodox Union, and you're going to see a plethora of communities that are saying, hey, move here. We've got these amenities for you. We've got cheaper housing. We've got a day school. We've got this. We've got that. And try to get younger couples to move in. And listen, I wish them luck. I think that there should be more than Jewish communities in the big 3 cities big 4 cities really: Miami, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, maybe Boston you could throw in there as well. But those would be like kind of the 5 major, quote unquote, Jewish cities that there are, to the best of my knowledge. All right, any questions about this news article? They could solve the problem the mayor of Surfside was having. Yes. Call back to last episode where we talked about the mayor of Surfside, or actually the former mayor of Surfside, who was trying to become mayor of Surfside once again, not being very happy with the amount of Jews apparently in the town of Surfside. That is very, very true. Yes. All right. Here's the next article. And Jew inequity, yes. Okay, so this is from an organization called Camera, and they have taken a picture of, pun. That was a really bad pun. I need to focus better on my jokes, apparently. Anyway, so a little bit, about halfway down the article, I would say, it talks about a Israeli easy for me to say, but it talks about an Israeli soccer player who is playing in the Turkish league and his Turkish soccer club, and his name is Sagi Jezkal. I believe is how you would pronounce it, Sagi Jezkal. He scored a goal, and he then calls the cameras, as usually soccer players are wont to do after they score a goal, and he points to his tape, and on his tape it says, the athletic tape, it says 100 days and the 7th of October, in memory of those who were abducted on October 7th and the massacre that happened in Israel. The Turkish government didn't really like that so much, and they detained him. And they launched an investigation, calling the player a vile dog. And I just want to interject here for a second, because I think that this is really, we really have to appreciate the amount of freedom of speech that we have, specifically here in America, to our cousins up north in Canada to a degree, and other places where you're allowed to actually do these things. Could what would the Turkish officials have done to Colin Kaepernick, for example, for taking a knee during the national anthem? Very, I'll leave that question hanging, but I think we all could understand what they probably would have done. However, the point that I wanted to get to is the New York Times didn't really reference this too much, because what they said in a news article was, to celebrate his goal, Mr. Jezkiel jogged to the corner of the field where a group of photographers were positioned. He pointed, and it says, and it said 100 days, 7/10, 7th of October. For those of us who are American, it would be 10/7. But a reference to the state of war, and this is what the New York Times then says. What does that mean? A reference to the state of war between Israel and Hamas on October 7th. That's it. Nothing else. Did anything happen to facilitate that war? Anything? Bueller? I think we know the answer to that. Just a little humor there, maybe. Although it looks like my humor is a little bit off today. All right. Any questions, comments, feedback on that news article? Frowny face, angry face by a commenter. Yes, agreed. All right. As some of you know from the last batch of episodes, the last season, season 3, one of my major kicks is biblical archaeology. I enjoy it a lot, and here's a cool article that from the Mosaic website, I guess you could say. They call themselves a magazine, but I don't know if they necessarily publish anything. Anyhow, the article talks about a depiction of the prophetess Deborah and her battle with the Canaanites, and the slaying of the general by Yael. And this is actually something that we as Jews read 2 weeks ago, two Sabbaths ago, two Shabbos ago. We read about this. In addition to the Torah reading that happens on Shabbos morning, where we read a section of the Torah, I'm going to just say roughly 100 verses. Could be more or less, but we're just going to use that round number. There's also something called the Haftarah that is read, which is generally something that is associated in some way with the theme of the weekly section that we read. And since the weekly section that we read had the song that Moses and his sister Miriam sang after the splitting of the Red Sea and the Jews escaping, Deborah had her own song that she did after there was a defeat on of the Canaanites, because that was a total complete upset. And she also had a song. So we go ahead with doing that as well. So this is actually very cool, where this was built around 400 CE in the ancient village of Hugog. I'm not sure where that may be, but or even if it's mentioned in biblically, but that is really, really cool. Let's see. Well, then another thing that they mention in this article is that this might be a rejoinder to the anti-Judean imagery propagated by the Romans on Judea Capta coins and other media following the first Jewish revolt. Right? During the first Jewish revolt, the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE, and they then minted coins saying Judea Capta, Israel, Palestine, whatever you want to call it, whatever, that's fine, was Judea, which was what the name was called at that point, was captured. And they did this also with a little bit later on, about 70 years later, which is with what is called the Bar Kokhba revolt as well. So, and that image has a woman embodied, who embodies the defeated Jewish people sitting in mourning beneath a palm tree. And here we have Deborah sitting beneath a palm tree, which again calls back to the book of Judges, where it mentions that Deborah sat under a palm tree and judged the people. She was a prophetess and a judge. And that is roughly chapter 4 or so of the book of Judges. And I am going to thank you very much for posting that. I'm going to probably use that as my image for the podcast. Thank you. And I'll thank the Biblical Archaeology Review. Maybe not. Okay, so any other thoughts or comments on that news article? My tea got cold, which I expected. I debated whether or not to get some more tea and reheat it, but I did not. So I'll have to suffer with cold tea. All right, looks like there are no comments, so let us move on to the main topic of today's podcast. Today's podcast is the main topic is interesting, and it's something that a lot of people ask when they are going through the Bible. And again, this is actually, before we talk about it, I just want to say, I often say there are no coincidences in life. And here's another example of where there are no coincidences. The Torah portion that is going to be read this coming Shabbos, that will be the 10th of February, talks about this topic of slavery and what happens, and certain rules that you have with having a slave. But the question is often asked that, well, if Judaism and the Torah is supposed to be so moral, how could slavery be even included in this book, right? How could it be okay to have slavery be even mentioned in this book? And that's the question that was asked to me, or actually not to me, but I think I said I would talk about it in a podcast, and I wanted to bring up a couple of points here with regard to that. I don't want to say anything definitively. I have a path that I want to take with this, and hopefully it's decent, and you'll let me know if there are any questions about it. But I just want to bring up one point that I just noticed today during my research, which is there was the later rabbis eliminated the category of slavery because it ceased to exist after the exile of the 10 northern tribes of Israel. This is going to be in the show notes as well, so you could be able to take a look at this article a little bit more in depth. I thought that was interesting, that, hey, if you're, you can't own one. And, also Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, who was a rabbi in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. Again, fascinating topic to discuss, and maybe I'll get to that at some point in time. But, he says, similarly, that a non-Jewish slave who flees his master, the reason why, he gives a reason. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, I lost my train of thought. I apologize. But he brings up this. He brings this up in terms of the slaveholder either loses ownership of the slave, but how it goes down is up to him. He can either comply with the court order and he's compensated, or he could just lose him. But owning slaves, even non-Jewish ones, is not something that is acceptable to him. So again, I'll post this into the chat as well, this article, and it talks about this. It's ironically enough titled, "Does the Bible Condone Slavery?" All right, there we go. And I just want to address something that somebody mentioned in the chat here regarding the $50,000 to with regard to Providence, and it says the individual says TFW, the feeling when Jews don't evangelize. Again, I don't think that necessarily Jews are evangelizing here, where we're not saying that you need to become Jewish and we're going to give you $50,000. What they are doing is incentivizing people who are already Jewish to move into the community. I would say that is a very less than a fine distinction. That line is pretty darn broad. So I just wanted to address that. Now, getting back to the topic at hand, where we are talking about slavery and the question of slavery, and the approach that I want to take with this is maybe it's a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more theological. Not theological, but a little bit more, up in the air, I guess you could say, which is the following approach. Now, I've spoken about Maimonides and Moshe ben Maimon, who was a tremendous philosopher, tremendous Torah scholar in the very like the 1000s or so. Grew up. He lived in Egypt. He was the physician for Solomon, I believe it was. So he was somebody that was very well renowned and well respected. He had wrote a book called The Guide to the Perplexed, and one of the let me just take a drink here of my cold tea, naturally. So he wrote a book called The Guide for the Perplexed, and in the Guide for the Perplexed, one of the things that he talks about is sacrifices, I should say. And the concept, the Bible does have the concept of sacrifices that need to be done on a daily basis, and for various other things, other events that happen. If you, perform, if you do a sin, if you do, for the holidays and for various other things. I'm not going to go into depth about that right now. However, he mentions in the Guide for the Perplexed that the reason that, so the question is always, let me take a step there. The question is, why does God need sacrifices? Does God really need to have these sacrifices? And he explains that the reason for this is because I'm going to try to get this straight. There were always sacrifices to not to God, and it was always done in a strange, in a way. So people were always used to this. So what was being done was, even though God really doesn't need sacrifices, God is the CEO of the universe. God is the omnipotent, all-knowing, all-powerful, and so he doesn't really, God doesn't need that. But to help focus people's, focus everything to the proper way, God decided to give this commandment of sacrifices, because those people, those individuals, those people that were leaving Egypt needed that, because that was something that they were used to. They were used to always having sacrifices. In fact, now to go, fast forward in history to the early 1900s, where Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Cook, Avraham Isaac Cook, the first chief rabbi of Palestine before it became Israel, he mentions in his writings something that was very fascinating to me when I saw it. And, I don't know if it'll happen. I don't know what the case is. But the reason for the animal sacrifices is the fact that we are in a certain level where, because that we need to have the blood for a certain reason. I really need to look it up again to remind myself, but it was something along the lines of, we're not at a perfect state. So since we are not at a perfect state, we need to have a non-perfect sacrifice to a degree. And once the Messiah comes, then we will not have the need for animal sacrifices anymore. This was something that he had pointed out, and it was very interesting. So now, what does that have to do with slavery, as I'm sure everybody is asking right now? And what I think that it has to do with slavery is that I think slavery was a similar idea. You could take slavery as a similar idea that as to what Maimonides is saying, where this was a group of people who came out of Egypt, and what were they doing in Egypt? They were slaves themselves. So, it's all, and in that time of the world, owning slaves was something that was very, very common, and in fact, that was probably, very accepted. It was accepted as, having slaves, through the Roman times as well. But I think what happens is that the Torah changes and takes this and puts it on its head to a degree, where it's making these rules, that it's making it on the tip of my tongue here, it's making it moral in a way to actually own the slaves, in terms of how they are kept. Not kept, that's a wrong word, but how you have to work with these slaves on a daily basis. For example, slaves get Shabbos off. Everybody gets Shabbos off. That is a rule. Hold on a second. And this was the other thing that I wanted to bring up here, which was this book here that I have, and it is a great book called Created Equal. Holding it up, I'm going to put it in the show notes as well, by Rabbi Joshua Berman, how the Bible broke with ancient political thought. And a lot of this, what he talks about here, is how, God took rules, or took what life was like, and turned it into, and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs does this as well in a lot of ways, and he makes it, the Torah makes it a moral thing, makes it something that is now moral. Now, I think, and I'm not even going to say I think, as I return the book to its rightful place. Now, getting back to our modern times, we've gone past the fact that we should actually have slaves. There is no need for slaves. Slavery is not something that we deem as moral anymore. And since we do not deem it as moral, I don't know what's going to happen at a, whenever the Messiah comes. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but we kind of evolved past it in a lot of ways. Now, this might open up a Pandora's box for a lot of different other things and other topics. But and why is it that this is necessarily something which we have evolved past, and other things, why can't we say that we've evolved past it as well? That is a fair question. I think I have an answer for that. And again, I don't know if this is the time for that or not. Maybe we'll bring it up on another time. All right. Any questions from the crowd? Okay. It does not look like that there are any questions from the group. I guess that I either dazzled them with my brilliance or I bored them to death. My bet is on the latter rather than the former. Okay. So with that, once again, we have reached the end of our episode today. I would like to thank the moderators of the Fifth Column podcast. Blanked out there. Sorry, senior moment. I would like to thank the moderators of the Fifth Column podcast unofficial Discord server for allowing me this platform once again to record in front of a live studio audience. It is great. I would like to thank those of you who are in the live studio audience as well. Couldn't have a great show without you. And I would like to thank Logan Eastman once again for the theme music on the intro of the show. Next time that we talk in 2 weeks, I am going to like to talk about the concept of 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And where do we actually get that from? So until next time, folks, I am Aaron Benedict, and I am not a rabbi.